Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw, and it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action. Allen. Deep downfield, wide open.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Massare, here with Mike Bundt for a special June final wrap-up OTAs edition. We're going to be talking about different players, different things that we saw throughout OTAs and mandatory minicamps. It's going to be a pretty good generic show today, Mike, to go over some special topics that we have. How are you today?
Doing great. Once again, sun right in my eyes, so maybe I should get some blinds in the future to fix this for our audience, but doing awesome. Just purchased some Syracuse football season tickets in addition to my Bills season tickets, so just a great time to talk some football heading into late June.
Yeah, good. The Bills wrapped up mandatory minicamp yesterday, so lots to get to there. I know it's just players versus air, but, I mean, it's June. That's what you're going to get. That's the topic for today. Last week, we went around and talked about some narratives that we wanted to talk about, so check that show out if you want to hear some around the NFL narratives. Today, we're going to keep it pretty Bills focused. And right off the bat, I mean, the buzz around OTA so far has been Tavon Austin. So that's been the buzz. I got to start there. I had some tweets, some questions about Tavon Austin. Can he make the team? What's the path for him? Can he be a returner? Can he edge out, Marquez Stevenson, Mike? What's your opinion on that? I wanted to talk right there. What's your opinion on Tavon Austin? Beside, obviously it's against air. We all know that. But at the same time, what do you feel in general about how he's studying from Josh Allen? All the reporters are saying he's looking good. Is there something there?
Way too early to say that.
Okay.
It's one of those things. He's a fancy name. He was a high first-round draft pick. People remember when the Bills traded down, got EJ Manuel, and then Austin was taken in their selection. Seeing these comments here, son, yes, it's in my face again. Should probably get sunglasses if I was smart, but obviously not proven to be that smart right now. But with Tavon Austin, I think he excites people because you go back to his highlights at West Virginia. You see a talent that's just an unbelievable player, but at the NFL level, it just really hasn't translated. It's really hard to believe that a guy that is going into his double-digit seasons in the NFL, getting around the early 30s right now, is really going to be somebody that's going to be impactful for the Bills. I think right now it's more hype from media trying to generate things than it is anything that will end up making an impact for this team in the regular season.
Interesting. Do you feel it's the same then as just a Percy Harvin or anything else? Or do you feel it's legitimately different?
I think I was more excited about a Percy Harvin, to be honest. Okay. If we're going to try to find a spot for Tavon Austin to make this team, we're really just talking about as a returner. And if he does get any snaps at wideout, assuming that he even makes the team, it's going to come from McKenzie or Stevenson. And I don't really know if I want that. I prefer to have an Isaiah McKenzie on this team, who's a little bit younger, has been with the Bills for a while now. I get it. Add some competition in camp, but not really needing him long-term on the team. I guess if he flashes and fits in well right away, good. But this is a guy that's been all over the place in recent seasons and really has never had a huge NFL season based on where he was drafted. And even if you look at the special teams perspective, he really hasn't been a returner in recent years. So I think this is more, you're seeing a guy that is quick, agile, has a lot of great athletic traits, but in right now, minicamp, that's when you see that. But when you put the pads on, it's not the same thing. So the media has been talking it up, but I think that's just middle of June, nothing else to really talk about type of hype at this point.
Interesting. Okay. I tend to look at it a little bit differently. I think it matters. I think that veteran presence is something that they really consider. There are some funny tweets about, well, the room's inexperience. There's this and there's that. I mean, you got Khalil Shakir. You do have, obviously, Gabriel Davis is going to his third year, who Josh Allen called a veteran presence. But I do believe that, you have Isaiah McKenzie, you have Jake Kumaro. You do have some veterans there in that room. Then obviously Stephon Diggs, but, Jamison Crowder. So I don't believe it's missing any veteran presence. However, I do think there's something to the fact that Bills prefer veterans over, like, say, a Marquez Stevenson. I do think that there's a path to the roster for Tavon Austin. I don't think it's a lock. I don't think it's a shoe-in for him, but he's looked good. But that's what you need to do. Like, he is who we're hearing about.
Would you actually give it? So, like, if you're saying right now,
today,
June 17th, what percentage chance do you give him to actually make the team? Because I don't know. I probably give it less than a quarter. We did the wide receiver breakdown a little while ago. We already know that Stephon, Davis, and then Crowder 1, 2, 3 are locks. At this point, at that point, we didn't know about Tavon Austin being in the picture, but we assumed that Isaiah McKenzie, then Khalil Shakir, and then Kumaro. So obviously, once you get to 6, like, you're starting to be a little shaky. But Kumaro does add a special teams aspect that the Bills like to prioritize. Could they keep 7 receivers? I guess it's possible if they really look at him as purely a returner. But I'm kind of curious why you would bring in a guy to be a returner that hasn't done it at the NFL level really on a consistent basis for quite a while. It's not even recent memory that he's returned kicks and punts. You got to go back to, like, his first 3 years in the NFL to when he actually did it on a consistent basis. Like, and it's not like he's 22, 23 anymore, where you're watching his West Virginia highlight film and him running around 5 different players and getting to the end zone. You're talking about a guy in his early 30s. Like, do we really think if he's out there that it's going to be explosive, or is this just to have a comparison, Reggie Bush 2.0, when you're excited about a former high pick who comes in and honestly all name, not much game to back it up?
Well, I mean, you got to look at it like this. I mean, he did go into a lull where the career seemed over, but did have a somewhat of a rebirth in Jacksonville in terms of 5 for 54 against Tennessee, 6 for 68 in week 15. Just a few weeks, but prior to the end of the season. So there is some game film there on him to show that he has done it, in a possession basis.
I don't see him playing any offense on this team. And if my thing too is a team like Jacksonville had all the cap in the world. If they thought anything of him, why did they go out and spend a bag load of money on all these mediocre receivers? I mean, adding Zay Jones, adding the guy from Arizona. If they really thought he was something, you would have thought they could have managed to keep him around on somewhat respectable contract. Jacksonville had all the money in the world. I'm not disagreeing with you that that maybe he could squeak his way on this team, but in my opinion, it's only as a returner. And thank you for moving the sun for me. It's always awful at the beginning of the show, and then it gets slightly better. And right now I feel perfectly fine. You guys can actually see my face, and I can see you guys now. But yeah, Kev, I respect your opinion. I respect that some people are excited about it. But as one of the comments said, we're basically arguing over a guy that's just fighting to make the squad. So, I mean, if you're the Bills, that's a good position where you really don't have to worry about this being a big move either way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else, right? It's just like I don't think it has to be like wide receiver comparisons. It's just like when the Bills signed another veteran like Josh Norman, you didn't expect him. He ended up taking Levi Wallace's job at one point this season. He was here. So I do believe that there is something that could be said where, yes, at full strength today, this minute, the odds are probably around where you have them. I think they're a little higher, maybe 30%. Not that's just squeezing lemons there. That's not a huge difference. But for me, it's a matter of one injury. Isaiah McKenzie gets hurt. Jamison Crowder, who's been known to get hurt, gets hurt. Those odds go from 20 to 25 to 30 to 40 to 45 to 50 pretty much overnight. So to me, it is an important position. I don't think it's just like, well, it's a backup linebacker. I don't think of it that way. I think it's a little bit more important to where the player plays and the player in front of him gets hurt. That's a pretty big look at what Isaiah McKenzie did against New England. That's a pretty big position in this offense to a pass heavy offense. That's it's just like anything else. If Dawson Knox goes down, what is OJ Howard? And that's another topic of OTAs that I wanted to go into too. For me to kind of wrap up Tavon Austin could be nothing. But I think that the opportunity that maybe he can return, and that's where his odds do go up. That's what I'm thinking about is his ability to return, his ability to do a lot of different things and be a jackknife type of player, which the Bills do prefer across their offense. It isn't just at receiver. They prefer it on the offensive line. They want their tight ends doing different things. They want their halfback, tight end, fullbacks doing different things like Reggie Gilliam. To me, I think it's a matter, even the running backs now with James Cook, to me, it's a matter of Tavon Austin can check a couple of boxes, and that gives me a little bit higher odds. You add in one injury at the receiver room, I think it could be any of the top six. It could be Kumaro even. Might open up a path for him. To me, it's a matter of I think there's a little bit better of odds than you think. And we all laugh at it being OTAs, but everybody noticed him. It wasn't just like one guy beating the drum of like Tavon Austin. It was literally reporter, comment from Josh Allen. So things like that.
I guess that's how much do you trust?
Why would they talk about Tavon Austin though? Why wouldn't they just talk about Gabriel Davis?
I'm just gonna say this and like,
why Tavon Austin?
You can take it for whatever it's worth. I mean, you guys all know I used to be a former sports anchor. Just because you're a sports anchor doesn't mean that you necessarily know the game inside out. When you're at a football practice watching the Bills, 90% of people that are not football, like former football players that actually played the sport or watched the sport or can break it down, the untrained eye can't watch a football practice and really know what's going on and say what's good or not. What sports anchors are doing at practice, they're talking with their buddies. They're getting some video that will look good to put on news, and then they have a story that they're already planning on going with. Yeah, something can happen like an injury or somebody could really stand out, but half the media that's covering a practice, they can't see the intricacies of what's going on. They have untrained football eyes, and I'm not going to say I'm any different. Like, obviously, we all know parts of the game and can say some things, but I like the comment right here from Ralph Wilson Sr. Didn't know he was still alive. A lot of groupthink, and that's my opinion on it. When you start seeing everybody start saying the same things on Twitter, on Facebook, so forth, I'm more so going to be critical of that than I'm going to just assume that they're right. Because a lot of the times they're going to repeat the same things because then they don't feel stupid if they go out on a limb. It's the guys like Eric at Cover One. It's the guys like Joe B that sometimes go against the grain, that have a take that is unlike everybody else, that I'm more likely to believe because they're the guys that are trained more to make those observations.
My question about that observation, though, is simple. It's the team doesn't lack storylines. You have Von Miller. You have the best receiver in the league in Stephon Diggs. It's not like the drought. Like, we're looking at this from like a drought point of view to where Percy Harvin, Reggie Bush, Anquan Bolden, even like some of those drought level players. And we're like just another drought level player, but it's different. We don't need those storylines. Like, they have legitimately best top talent in the NFL at most of their position groups. groups. Their quarterback's one of the best in the league. Their receiver's one of the best in the league. They have one of the best pass rushers in the league. They have the best safety tandem in the league. They have one of the best corners in the league, a first-round pick cornerback who we should be talking about.
But Kevin,
we're talking about Tavon Austin.
That's boring stuff.
Tavon Austin isn't boring?
No, Tavon is not boring for the reasons I said. It's. I know this is a weird conversation to have to start a podcast,
but it's interesting.
But the way media is covering stuff, like Bills have great secondary, Bills have good defensive line, Bills have Von Miller, Bills have Josh Allen. Like all those things have already been addressed.
Okay.
Like we already know all of that. That's nothing new. And they've already talked about these players 5 million times. So what are they going to talk about? They don't have anything to talk about. It's like the age-old thing. Like it's easier to talk about a team when they're horrible than when they're really good. Because when they're horrible, you have so many things that you can break down and discuss. Why are they horrible? Because they make stupid decisions, because their players aren't good enough. They need to improve this. They need to do that. And then you can break down coaching decisions, how they're trying to build the team, so forth and so forth. When you're a Super Bowl contender, you're a great team, and you have so few holes on your roster. Like right now, like literally Tavon is the one little exciting thing that they see. So hype it up right now when you can. And then if he flames out in training camp, then you just pretend like you never hyped it up in the first place. Who cares? Like I guess I could easily be wrong, but from my experience, just consuming media, being part of it for 5 years on a smaller scale than Buffalo, that's just how it works. And it's a flashy, fun story to get out there. The casual football fan gets excited. Then you read some papers and click on a couple websites, and then it just fades away. It's like everything else.
All right, interesting. And then you kind of transitioning. Obviously we'll get back to Tavon Austin. I have a lot of things here about getting his pads on, seeing him in camp, seeing how he can return. I do think he's a fun preseason story, if nothing else. But at the end of the day, we've already named the receivers that Bills do have. We're excited about Khalil Shakir. Like, yes, he's talked about a little bit, but ultimately he's a brand new player that just entered the building. So there's a little bit of that. So you have Khalil Shakir, you have Jamison Crowder. We have some guys we want to watch it's not just the Davis and Diggs show. We want to see the guys behind him in general. So obviously Tavon Austin is one of those players. Also sticking to the offensive side of the ball for a second. I tweeted this out today and I want opinions on it. I said this Bills weapons now in totality is better than what Josh Allen had in 2018. Their backups, right? So someone tweeted about their backup unit. How many games did the backup offensive line win with Case Keenum, with the backup O-line, with the backup weapons? It looks better than some of the weapons that Josh Allen had in 2018. So that is how deep, and to our previous discussion about Tavon Austin, I would have loved to have, especially back in 18, I would have loved to have Tavon Austin on the roster. That time he was, kind of still potentially being the guy he could have been. That would have been more of a drought level move at that point. Now it's beyond the drought level move. Now you're looking at these weapons of real possibilities, Mike. What do you think about the depth on this roster? And my point of I think the team wins 6 games with their backup unit, their second unit, and their starting defense.
Yeah, I mean, the 2018 offense was truly horrible. So it's really hard to be worse than that with Kelvin Benjamin as your number one wide receiver at that point. Zay Jones is your 2 and so forth. Some of the names on that team, you forget they were even contributors for the Bills. But yeah, you got to love the depth. When you got a guy like OJ Howard as your number 2 tight end, that's a big upgrade from last year. And yeah, he might not be what people expected him to be out of Alabama, but to have him as a number 2, that's strong. That's solid depth right there. Offensive line, a ton of great depth additions this offseason, where you're going to have some battles for the backup line spots with some of the guys that they brought in, players with proven NFL starting experience at multiple positions on the line. Mm-hmm. Wide receiver, like you said, we've already hit that home. If you're talking about like a Jamison Crowder, a Khalil Shakir, Isaiah McKenzie as your 3, 4, 5, and a guy like Tavon Austin possibly getting cut, yeah, you're looking at vastly improved across the board. And then Case Keenum, I mean, as a backup quarterback, is better than what Josh was as a rookie. So yeah, this team of backups on offense would be all right. Obviously, you wouldn't want any scenario where that would ever be the case, but it's a good sign that after focusing so many years on filling holes that now the Bills can address depth and things like that, which can sometimes come back to kill you when you have injuries over the course of the season. Obviously, Trey White going down last year. I still think if he's healthy, the Bills win the Kansas City game and they go on to win the Super Bowl. So you can never have enough. It's just hopefully you have, when the injuries come, it's to the positions that you do have the depth and not positions where unfortunately you're a little bit weaker at.
Yeah, and let's talk about it now. You got into most notably the names. So you have, here's the backup, technically, currently, right now, as it sits, the backup offense. Case Keenum, James Cook, Jake Kumaro, Crowder, technically, I guess, Shakir, Howard, Doyle, Butker, Greg Mans, Greg Van Roten, and Quisenberry. I mean, it's a decent unit. And I tagged you as well, Mike, the other day when they called this one of the best backup offensive lines, and probably better than some starting units. It does have the means to have some depth there, but Butker's been a starter. Van Roten's been a starter. Quisenberry was a starter, again, with one of the best running attacks in the league. Tommy Doyle still developing, but had one of the best razzes ever recorded, as Kent Lee Platty said on our show. And Mans has started some games too. So that's a pretty solid plug and play if you need to. Even at the quarterback position, at times Case Keenum looked better than Baker last year. And there's really some plug and play players there. Crowder's technically a starter, but I guess it depends like what you're doing. But OJ Howard's definitely an upgrade over what he could be, the best tight end that the team has had in a long time beside Dawson Knox. Like, really would have been better than most of the drought level guys, besides Scott Chandler, probably every tight end that they've had this decade.
Yeah, I mean, OJ Howard's had proven results in Tampa Bay. Like I said, the numbers weren't what people were hoping for out of college, but you're talking about a guy that can consistently get over 30 catches, 400 to 500 something yards, and 3 to 5 touchdowns a year when healthy. Obviously, the last 2 years were big disappointments. 1 year hurt, and then last year really never took off with Brady and the Bucs. But you go back to his first 3 or 4 seasons when first 3 seasons when people were critical of him, it really wasn't as bad as what some would make you believe. It's not great by any thing in the imagination, but definitely you put him on the Bills. If it wasn't for Dawson Knox being on the team, and say the Bills would have acquired him in a trade after year 1, year 2, year 3, Bills fans would have been hyped about a move at that time.
Yeah, especially after year 2. He was on a Dawson Knox-like trajectory. He really was until Brady essentially came and stopped using him for whatever reason. But he was on a Dawson Knox-like path with Jameis Winston.
That's kind of the concerning thing. Like, what happened with Brady joining the team that leads his production to go down? Normally, you think you get one of the greatest all-time quarterbacks if you were something special at tight end, that suddenly your production.
He likes his players, though, man.
Yeah,
he likes his players.
You had. There's just so much talent on Tampa Bay.
Look at those New England teams.
Evans, yeah.
He picked random players that
Antonio Brown. Yeah, he wanted his guys, and then adding Gronk, and you have 3 tight ends that are productive.
And Cameron Brate.
So, yeah, so I mean, it's fair. I mean, maybe he was just the odd man out, and unfortunately, Brady didn't really pick him too much. But hopefully, we see a little bit of a change in Buffalo with him getting what I would assume a few more targets than what he got in recent years in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, Scott Chandler was the shoveling snow after they had to postpone their game and go to the play in Detroit against the Jets. So that was definitely Scott Chandler. OJ Howard has the talent. Like, we were talking about Tavon Austin a little bit earlier in the show. Talk about, he has a highlight package too. One of the best players to play tight end position in college too. He was really, really good.
Yeah,
like he was really good.
He was a beast. I
probably some of the best college tape. Tight end position.
What the Bills do a lot of times is they take a flyer on these guys that first round picks might not have panned out somewhere else, but let's see what they have anything left in the tank, and why not? It's a low risk, high reward. You sign a guy like OJ Howard, you sign a guy like Tavon Austin based on some of the traits they bring to the table. Don't pay them much. They come and they end up being productive. Well, you might hit a home run every once in a while. 19th
overall pick. I mean, definitely a top 20 tight end. In college, he had 1,700 yards and 7 touchdowns in a great Alabama SEC program. And then, his numbers aren't shoddy by any stretch of the imagination. Same 1,700 yards and 15 touchdowns in the NFL. This isn't a career. His career has been decent. It hasn't been what you want out of a top 20 pick. Played 5 seasons in Tampa Bay. Tight ends do take a little bit to develop. Look at Knox at times. But like, quite frankly, it's a dynamic second tight end to have. And the difference is he's only 28.
Yeah.
He's just turning 28 this year during the season.
If he wasn't a first-round pick tight end, the way we would look at this would be completely different. We would be excited. I mean, Bills fans are excited, but if say he was a third, fourth-round pick, averaging 30-plus receptions a year in Tampa Bay, people would say that's a very productive tight end. Mm-hmm. You're getting tremendous value for where you drafted him. So a lot of this is just an expectations game for where he was drafted, but that's part of the NFL. Where you get drafted is oftentimes how you're going to be defined as a player. Tavon Austin was a 6th-round pick, and he ended up having the career he did. People would love Tavon Austin for what he has become. You're an 8th overall pick, though. There's some expectations that come with it. So both of these are players that they really haven't lived up to the hype, but that doesn't mean that they might not show flashes here and there.
Yeah, and 66% catch potential when you throw to O.J. Howard in his career in Tampa. I don't know. There's some stuff to like. He was, getting 10 yards a catch. There's definitely some ability there, and I'm interested to see what the Bills are able to do in a lot of different personnel packages, 2 tight end sets, your 12s, your 22s, all types of different things that you can use the tight end a little bit more, move tight end, help in the running game. You can bring your 6 offensive linemen in with David Quisenberry. The offensive line gives me hope. I think it's worlds better than it was last year, Mike, in terms of small changes. We're not talking about going to trade for Laramie Tunsil or making huge moves, but you're talking about subtle changes. You found Bates, you were able to continue to develop Spencer Brown. You're able to plug in Roger Saffold, which is a huge adding to the depth behind with Butker. Now you have Quisenberry, now you have a few other guys. Or Greg Van Roten was just cut a couple weeks ago, a guy that signed a pretty big deal from Carolina to the Jets that, we talked about with Ty on Let's Talk Jets. He's a guy that definitely had potential, was not just straight up bad. He was a decent offensive lineman at times. So there's some stuff to like with this offensive line unit. And he was kind of the missing piece. And I'm not sitting here saying Greg Van Roten might not take a snap, but he's definitely was the missing piece to the offensive line roster for me. I wasn't feeling good about, with Ike Butker not being on the roster probably week 1, I wasn't really feeling great about who the backup interior offensive lineman is. And now it's Greg Van Roten. I think it's a pretty good. I know you've been a little bit more critical of the offensive line. Now that
I like what they've done.
Now that it's put together, what do you think, though, as we go into training? I think the line's
going to be solid. I don't think we're talking about a top 5, top 6 unit, but there's no reason why they can't be above average overall. And I think where they're really going to be improved this upcoming season is just their toughness in the run game and being able to open up holes better in lanes for Singletary and James Cook. Because I think when you're talking about the Bills' offensive line last year, they had some fake toughness. I mean, guys like John Feliciano was a fan favorite, but he wasn't the best offensive lineman. You got some guys on the right side, Darrell Williams, Cody Ford, who really didn't pan out. There was some athleticism concerns with some of the guys. And then you had Deion Dawkins battling COVID early in the year, coming back from COVID, pardon me, and just wasn't quite there to open the season. So there was a lot of weaknesses with this offensive line last year. They struggled in short running situations where you knew they were going to hand it off to Singletary. That forced Josh to be more of a dual threat than I think they ever imagined entering the year. Josh had his best running year as a quarterback in the NFL last year for yards, and that's great. I mean, because he can do that. But I definitely don't think that was the intention entering the year to play that style. And I think with some of the additions, you add in a Roger Saffold and then a Quisenberry, who's a very good run blocker. Spencer Brown is already a solid run blocker. I think what you're going to see is a little bit more of hope to run the ball on short to gain situations. And hopefully that ends up working for this team, gets Josh hit a few less times, and is something that can work in the red zone. Because as much as I love the Bills doing QB power and Josh doing this thing on the edge, I would rather that be a product of a broken play where he scrambles and gets his yards than being forced to do it every time it's a 3rd and short.
And some interesting stats, the Bills went out and addressed the run blocking of the offensive line. They didn't necessarily do a ton to the pass blocking skill set from the offensive line perspective, but they went out and determined that they needed better run blocking. What did they do? Quisenberry is one of the best run blockers in the NFL. Hate to say it, struggled in pass, but is one of the best run blockers in the NFL. PFF gave him an 86.5, if you like to use them, the best run blocker on the Bills in general. Reggie Gilliam, another good run blocker. He should see more snaps this season. One of the better blocking fullback, tight end, halfbacks, whatever you want to call them in the NFL. You keep moving down the list. Greg Van Roten, 75, one of the best run blocking from the interior positions in the NFL. Struggled in pass. What's the trend here, Mike? They trust Josh Allen to make up for some of the deficiencies and Aaron Cromer can work on some of the pass ability with some of these guys. But they kind of said, let's run the ball better. We trust Josh to maybe get into some of these deficiencies from the pass blocking that some of these guys have had, but they clearly went out and signed a bunch of guys that were really good against the run. Roger Saffold, the same thing, one of the best run blocking guards in the league. It's a pretty big trend. Struggled at times in pass. Spencer Brown, kind of the same, played really well run last year, struggled against the pass. So I believe that they want guys that can move the ball. They don't want these slips on 4th and goal against Tennessee. They want to be able to set the edge, set the line of scrimmage, and run the ball a little bit better. They think that'll take more off of Josh than maybe a little slight tick in pass blocking. Josh Allen, per Jordan Palmer, is the best eluder of pressure in the NFL, the entire NFL. About 30% of the time, he's able to elude pressure and complete the pass. So he's one of the best eluders of pressure in the league. What did the Bills go out and do, Mike? They signed very good run blocking offensive linemen. That's what they did. They're putting it together. Greg Van Roten just follows suit in that and is a guy I expect to maybe see some snaps this year if there's any type of lapses in the guard position or if there's an injury.
Yeah, no, man, I agree. And you kind of hit it on the nail. Even with the offensive line last year that was designed to pass protect, they didn't really do a good job at it. And Allen had to get out of trouble by himself most of the time. So if that's going to be the case, get some guys that are hogs up front that can at least get you that yard when you need it. And Allen can still do his thing. And you don't ever want Allen to be running for his life on every play. But as we saw last year, he is very good at evading it when necessary. And I think adding that run game was the big part in why they finished last year so strong. And now that they added the guys that they did to their offensive line, I think they're going to hope to do it more consistently, be consistently strong. I know I'm not expecting them to suddenly become a run-first team and running it on 2nd and long or running it on 1st down all the time, but it'll be nice to add that option to change things up every once in a while. So you're not always one-dimensional. I know a lot of people last year were getting angry with the Bills when they would run it in certain situations. And yes, you got Josh Allen who can do so much magic for you, but you need to switch it up to keep defenses on their feet every once in a while. And being able to have an effective running game really does wonders for your offense as a whole. I just want to get to this one comment. I know we talked about this earlier in the show, but we all love McKenzie. Does he do anything better than Austin? Well, he's a younger guy. He's already in the Bills offense. He knows everything that they do. Tavon Austin, you mentioned punt return. He hasn't been doing that in years. So is Tavon Austin a better player? Maybe, but I don't know if you can even prove that 100%, but just wanted to get to that quick, Kev.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's a good debate. I mean, he might be a better returner. Definitely was at times, for sure. One of the reasons Isaiah McKenzie's on the Bills is his struggles at return. He was supposed to be the returner in Denver. Denver waived him. Brandon Beane said, let me come right in. Isaiah McKenzie is just an absolute legend in the locker room. We all saw him sing on America's Got Talent. I think he's roster spot secure. I think there's package for him already. The bigger battle there for Tavon Austin is, we've already talked about it, is A, injury, but B, can he prove that he has more worth than Stevenson? Can he prove that he has more worth than Isaiah Hodgins? Can he prove that he has more worth somewhat than maybe even Jake Kumerow, or maybe some other borderline players to where you keep 7 because Kumerow is a special teamer. Austin would be returning kicks and punts. So there's really, yes, it would be 7 in nature, but those are guys that each have a special role on the roster, just like Taiwan Jones does. So, kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about that depth on the offense specifically. I personally believe it's deep. I think it's deep across the board. And Tavon Austin just another example that we're sitting here talking about the 7th receiver on the roster. Like, I think that's a good problem.
It's incredible. It's crazy that they can go that deep at receiver. And it also shows you that when you have an all-world quarterback, that the talent around you is elevated. I mean, we saw it with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady for years. They make the players around them that much better because they're smart, intelligent. They put their players in the best positions to succeed. How much of that is the player? How much is that the coaching staff and the quarterback putting the players where they need to be? It's all about chemistry and being on the same page with everybody, and also having the talent to execute what you're trying to do. So, great depth, but got to give a great hand to Josh Allen as well for helping develop some of these guys throughout the Bills offense.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the total run blocking numbers too from this unit as we talk about depth, Greg Van Roten is the 14th best, and Roger Saffold's the 15th best run blocking guard in the league. So that's not a mistake that they went out and tried to find top 15, top half of the starting level running blockers. You know what they're trying to do. Aaron Crimliff was comfortable with what he's able to teach from the past sets, but they're looking for a specific thing there, and going out and making sure that you lock in some of the better run blocking guards in the league. That's not a mistake. So they're willing to take the deficiency, to your point about Allen, they're willing to take the deficiencies at the pass blocking position in order to benefit the run. So that's going to be an interesting thing as we develop into training camp here. I really want to watch what it looks like. Is the 5 that we've talked about entrenched starters? I believe they are, but we'll see. Ryan Bates is just kind of solid across the board, so we're going to see how that all looks. But if nothing else, I would have loved to have Van Roten. I would have loved to have even Quisenberry at times last year. Like you said, the Bills struggled at pass sometimes anyways. So to have that dominant ability at the run, I would have loved to have some of that depth, even as recent as last year, but definitely years prior when they had some lapses on the offensive line position. And definitely OJ Howard, as we can kind of round out the offense. Would have loved to have him on some of those teams, as well as Dawson Knox was developing. And then you kind of look at the receiver room now, where kind of the topic of the day here is OTAs and Josh and Tavon Austin. I would have loved to have him as a flyer back on some of those teams, maybe before Gabriel Davis. So there's definitely some interesting play here. I'm really interested in this offensive battle just because of how deep it is. I don't think that I think there's going to be legitimate battles here. And I do think there's going to be some legitimate trades Brandon Beane's going to be able to make in order to recoup some picks for not getting compensation picks because they're so heavy in free agency. So I am interested to see that. And that's not even, we didn't even really talk about the running back room. That's what do we do with Zach Moss? I think, our guys over at the Air Raid Hour said, what guy, out of these kind of busts do you expect the most from, Mike? And I wanted to ask you that kind of as OTAs comes to a close, as spring minicamps comes to a close. Do you have any hopes for any of those guys that busted, the Cody Fords, the Zach Mosses, the Boogie Bashams, the AJ Epinesa? I know we haven't really focused on defense at all this show, but have any of those guys, who do you think, I don't have a ton of hope for a lot of them, but, Tommy Sweeney's, like, who do you have any hope for from all of those kind of third, fourth year guys that are looking for like that final chance?
So I've given up on Cody Ford. I wanted him to pan out. I don't think he makes the roster. They've brought in all these offensive linemen because they have given up on him as well. Then when you're talking about Zach Moss, I have not given up on Zach Moss yet. I don't know what his role will be on this team. I don't know if he's going to be active for a ton of games this year, but I do think there's still the possibility of him contributing. He was not awful his rookie year. And towards the end of his rookie season, he actually was starting to take the majority of the carries in the backfield. After the injury, things kind of got off to a bad start last year, never could get momentum behind him, and obviously was pretty sloppy when he was in the game. But he's only entering his third year in the league. He was a productive player at Utah. And yes, adding a guy like James Cook probably hurts his potential to be much of a breakout player, but it's not like James Cook and Zach Moss are similar players in the way they help an offense. James Cook is going to be more of a receiving threat. Zach Moss has added a little bit of a receiving aspect to his game in his 2 years in Buffalo, but I still think of Zach Moss as kind of a guy that's a thick body up in the middle that can be a hard to tackle guy. I look.
What
at
do you
Zach
like
Moss,
about Moss, though, in general? Do you think that he'll put it together with this
I
kind of
do
more
think
run blocking style, or what do you
I
like?
do think he could because I
Okay.
look at him as a guy that's hard to take down. Devin Singletary did do better last year once he started taking the bell cow of the offense. So I guess the question you would have with the Bills is if you do expect Zach Moss to be somewhat decent, is how do you divide all of this? So does Devin Singletary get 50% of the carries? You give 25% to the Cook and another 25% to Zach Moss, and then focus Cook in the pass game. I don't know. It's hard for me to see Zach Moss having a big statistical season, but I still think there's a possibility of him having value, especially if there's an injury at any point to any of the guys ahead of him. And we don't know what's going to happen with Singletary after this season. Will the Bills keep him? Will the Bills move on? I think Zach Moss's development in training camp, preseason, regular season this year, assuming he makes the team, will play a big role in what they ultimately decide to do with Devin Singletary, as well what Singletary is trying to get in the market. And then about some of the other players that we've discussed about Boogie Basham, I can't give up on a guy that's only entering his second year in the league. Yeah, a second-round pick, had a couple bright moments, not a huge rookie year, but to me, it's too early to give up on him. Give him at least another year, see what he does there. AJ Epineza last year was disappointing. That's for sure to say. He had the hot start against Miami early on, week 2, and then it was just kind of all downhill from there. Really not much production. But sometimes it takes defensive ends. Sometimes it takes some of these second, third-round picks 2-3 years to develop. If we would have asked people what they thought about Dawson Knox after his second year in the NFL, many people would have just given up on him and said cut ties. So, and we all saw what Dawson Knox did last year. So some of these guys, it just takes a little bit longer to develop. And when you're on a stacked roster where you don't really get an opportunity to just be out on the field at every single moment, it's going to be harder to stand out sometimes. So I'm not ready to give up on most of them, but unfortunately, Cody Ford, I've seen enough with him. I'm ready to move on from him, but I'm going to give some more time to Zach Moss, Boogie Basham, and we'll see with AJ Epineza. This really needs to be a breakthrough year, or else he's going to be kind of in trouble going into his fourth season.
It's interesting because the Bills replaced, we'll kind of talk about the running back position first, and then we'll kind of wrap the show by talking about defense a little bit as it pertains to what we saw in OTAs and some of the players you just mentioned. Kind of wrap offense by saying they wanted a specific skill set. They went out and tried to get J.D. McKissick. They went out and got O.J. Howard, a better receiving type of weapon that they could have block at times. What are they adding here? Receivers, right? They went out and drafted James Cook. They went out and even in their UDFAs and Raheem Blackshear, a pass catching guy at Virginia Tech, and Duke Johnson. So, to me, it's a matter of, it's very specific. Just like we just talked about the O-line, the run blocking was something they 100% said, we need better run blockers. They went out and got 2 top run blockers at the guard position that were reasonably priced, obviously, without being the best player in the league. They went out reasonably and addressed run blocking there at the guard position, as well as the tackle position as well, with Quisenberry, a guy that, quite frankly, is one of the best running blockers in the league, 6th from the tackle position. So, you have a top 10 run blocker at the tackle position, and you added 2 top 15 run blockers at the guard position. That was what they designated they needed. Check over. Move to the running back spot. They designated they needed some receiving help for Josh Allen. They just said we were lacking there. Screen game sucks. Some running back out of the backfield sucks. Singletary does it at times. No one else really does it. They were struggling there. Tried to pay McKissick. They couldn't. They needed a tight end too. So they paid Howard. Very clearly what they were trying to do at the weapons position or get guys that can catch the ball. James Cook adds that. I just don't see Zach Moss fitting into this. I just don't see him fitting into this scenario. I believe they would probably make room for Duke Johnson and or Raheem Blackshear before that they make Zach Moss work. We'll see. He could come into camp totally refreshed, totally rejuvenated. He's had those cryptic tweets all season. I think he knows what's up against him. I just don't believe he fits in there. I think Singletary is the better version of him. I think he does it all. I think they went out and got James Cook to really fill a need. That was really the running back they did once Breece Hall went off the board. I still believe he may have been as high as anybody on their draft board once Hall came off the board. So
I'm not going to disagree with you, but you're right. Yeah, they want a certain type of running back, and they already have Devin Singletary. But it's a situation where I'm actually more encouraged by Zach Moss based on the fact that they went after a certain type of running back with James Cook and J.D. McKissic, because those are not going to be guys that are ever going to get a huge amount of carries in a game. Like, how many carries are you going to talk about James Cook in an average game? Like, what, 5 to 6 carries maybe? Like, he's a guy that's probably going to get a little over 100 carries in the season. So it's not like that just takes away a ton of carries from Zach Moss. And yeah, I like I said, I don't expect Zach Moss to be a huge statistical guy on this team.
Yeah.
But they still invested a 3rd round pick in him. And I know that it's always a question: when do you cut bait? When do you hold on to somebody? But the future status of Singletary is going to end up making the biggest, I think, factor in what you do with Zach Moss, as well as what he does this offseason going into training camp preseason. The one thing you mentioned, what have the Bills been doing this entire offseason for the offense? It's been adding versatility. They're trying to be a more versatile offense. Last year, they were too one-dimensional entering the season. Teams started doing the 2 high safeties against them, and the Bills, against certain teams, were exposed. Teams that were able to get pressure on them without blitzing put them in a lot of trouble. Pittsburgh handled the Bills' offense last year. There's a couple other games where the Bills' offense really struggled to get going. And like I said, it's not that I'm expecting the Bills to suddenly become a running team overnight, but they're definitely trying to have a better efficiency when they do go to the run. I think one thing that we've been talking about a little bit is you might even see Josh Allen under center a little bit more this year, bring in some play action, bring in some different aspects. Kevin doesn't like that, but there's a reason why they went out and got O.J. Howard. It's not that I saw a comment earlier, who's the Bills' outside wide receiver depth behind Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. And the truth of it is they don't really have a great option behind Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, but they have a lot of other players at different positions that can make up for it. By having 2 tight ends, now you got a O.J. Howard that you can throw in the game at different parts. You have James Cook who can contribute in different ways. So they're not going to be the same offense we saw the last 2 years. And how they're going to make up for it is they're going to mix other things in a little bit more. They're still going to be pass heavy, but you can be pass heavy while still having different ways of accomplishing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an interesting way to recap the spring offense. You want to say versatility, key. Number 2, run blocking, key. Number 3, pass catching out of the backfield and with your secondary and tertiary weapons, right? That's kind of like what the Bills try to put together. Like, we have the top end guys. Gabriel Davis has developed to take over for Sanders. We have Stephon Diggs, duh. We have Dawson Knox, duh. But what do we have behind that? That's what they want to develop in the pass game. They wanted to run block better, and they need versatility with your Isaiah McKenzie's, Tavon Austin's, etc. Khalil Shakir, we'll see what he's able to do. It's a really good unit. This is one of the best offenses I think I've seen. I think it's one of the best offenses I've covered. I think it's the best offense that we've ever had in Buffalo. We'll see if it amounts to that this season. I don't think that they've had all the pieces like this, definitely since Jim Kelly.
There's only one question mark. There's only one question mark.
What do you got?
Offensive coordinator. How does it all come together?
Okay, and that is a topic that I've seen that I wanted to actually touch on today too, and that's kind of how a good topic of the offense today. And I had here in my notes. And I wanted to ask you this: do you think we can sit here and poo-poo it, but do you think that Ken Dorsey can make that immediate step into a role to be able to lead the best offense in the NFL, or one of the best offenses the Bills have had in the history of their? Or does that make it easier? Does it make it harder or easier?
I don't think you can say that either way with certainty. I think you don't know until he calls plays. I mean, some first-time coordinators, I'm assuming they could come in and be in over their head, overthink it, and make some pretty horrible decisions. But I think some other coordinators come in and they have confidence in themselves. They have confidence that they know what they're doing and the talent that they have on the field. And it's just playing football. So it really depends on the mindset and what happens when they have signs of adversity. Do they overcome, or do they fall to the challenge? I'm not really worried about Ken Dorsey calling plays. I think you're talking about a quarterback from one of the best college teams of all time, played in the NFL for a little bit, has been a coach now for a good amount of time, has learned under a great staff here in Buffalo. I think Ken Dorsey has been groomed to be this position for a very long time. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, let's not act like it's all Ken Dorsey doing it. Josh Allen's going to be greatly responsible for Ken Dorsey's success as well. And he can mask up a lot of the deficiencies that Dorsey might have as a rookie. So I'm not really too worried. When Brian Daboll came to Buffalo, he was a offensive coordinator on some of the worst offenses in the NFL. He was in Kansas City. He was in Cleveland and Miami. And they were awful. And people were like, why are you hiring this guy that was holding Alabama's offense back even when they won a national championship? You know what? He had the right players, had the right coaching staff around him, and the Bills took off with Brian Daboll. So there's no reason why I think we should just assume that Ken Dorsey won't be successful. And I like the comment. I thought everybody hated Brian Daboll. I swear, Bills fans forget. There's a lot of Bills fans that did not like Brian Daboll.
You didn't let me go yet. Didn't let me go.
I was cool with Brian Daboll. St. Francis alum here, proud to have him repping my alma mater. But yeah, Bills fans were hard on him for many periods before things really took off.
There's two people that I did not like on the roster last year. It should be pretty known if you follow me or follow my takes. Didn't like Levi Wallace. I think it's laughable that he even got paid at all. A lot of people said he got value at $4 million. They had him at 7 or 8 or 6. Guy stinks. Okay. Sean McDermott made Levi Wallace good. The defense was good. It was DB friendly. He can break on the ball. Okay. Guy stinks. The guy stinks.
We'll see I don't agree with that, but we'll see.
If you knew how to pick, we'll see in Pittsburgh. If you knew how to pick on him, guy stinks. He was not very good. Okay. That's my opinion. I don't think he's very good. He's at best semi-average corner. If you really want to go that route. So glad the Bills determined that. He said that he chose the Pittsburgh. The Bills came with the same offer that they came in every year. Precedent says they came in at 1 for 2. 1 year for $2 million. That's probably what they offered him. And at that level, I won't complain.
I think
that's about right.
I think he's serviceable, but when you're going for a championship and you can upgrade, you choose to upgrade. And the Bills obviously thought getting one of the top 4 first-round corners was addition by subtraction by letting Levi walk.
Okay. Yeah. So at the very least, I'll agree with you there on that point. I think he's worse than that, but I'll agree with you that I think that upgrade is good. And we'll see in the Bills end this year too, what that means. We'll see if they are able to take the next step. Obviously they're adding Von Miller, which could have helped Levi, but we'll see the difference there, beside maybe some rookie hiccups and some problems there. And Levi Wallace had plenty of them, that we'll see what Kyer is able to do. So that aside, number 2 to our topic though, we'll leave Levi in the cornerback room, maybe for training camp for now. But for number 2 I was not a Brian Daboll fan. I thought he thought things. I really do believe some of the heat around. I have people in New York that tell me that Daboll said that he was willing to take an offensive coordinator position, even if he didn't get the head coaching job. And even Brian Flores alluded to that too during his lawsuit, that Brian Daboll had told him he was willing to be an offensive coordinator. So I do believe that there was something there, like where there's smoke, there's fire, Mike. I love McDermott and I don't blame him, if he was having issues with the offense. Look at the Jacksonville game. Never lose that. That game should have been in Buffalo. That game should have been a divisional game, should have been in Buffalo. And that is exactly why it matters though. You can't just sleepwalk offensively and not have the right game plan against one of the worst teams in the NFL. Sean McDermott wasn't happy. I don't know
what truly was going on.
No, of course not.
There was obviously some discontent, but that's going to be normal throughout any NFL locker room coaching staff. You get heated. It's competitive.
Yeah, sure,
you got people at the top of their business industry, and they're gonna.
I think that I could with proper veteran help, I could be the offensive coordinator for Josh Allen. I really believe that.
Maybe
I really believe that. He's the best player in the league.
What I would say is this: he wasn't the best player in the league when Brian Daboll came to Buffalo, and I definitely think there was some discontent between Daboll and McDermott. If I was to guess, it'd probably be that McDermott was upset that the Bills' run offense was very mediocre at times, that it was too dependent on Josh Allen doing power and putting himself in a position where he could get hurt. McDermott probably wasn't happy that the Bills' offensive line was very bad at pass protecting at times, could not get critical yards in important situations. Look back to the Tennessee game, that 4th and inches.
0-6 and 1 score
Jacksonville
games.
game. Look back to Pittsburgh game where they couldn't block Melvin Ingram. So there's plenty of situations where I could see why McDermott would be upset. And when they were in such a pass-heavy attack early in the year, they were just setting themselves up for teams to just go right at them, and they didn't have answers for quite a while. And I guess the one big question I have for the Bills from last year was when they started committing to the run after the New England Monday night game. Going into December, when they were really on a little bit of a skid. People forget the Bills in like late November, early December last year, they were in some trouble. And
they were like 7th in the rankings. Yeah, they were like 7th in the AFC.
Yeah, was it McDermott that told Brian Daboll, we have to establish a run game going forward for this offense to take forward?
Yeah, conceivably.
Or was it Daboll telling McDermott? That's going to be the big question, because a lot of fans aren't going to want to hear that. Go to the run. But if that was McDermott, then he deserves quite a bit of credit for switching the Bills out of what they primarily thought they were going to be earlier in the year.
Yeah. Well, I tend to think that the strong head coaching role that McDermott has, I tend to think he went to him and said, run the ball better, dude. Like, figure it out. Like, I'm not going to tell you how or what to do or who, but run.
And then they bring Cromer in. So, I mean, it kind of, and you make those signings with the offensive line. It has McDermott's footprints all over it. I mean,
clearly they didn't like Bobby Johnson. Clearly, like seriously, they really did not think he added anything. Maybe even Daboll threw him under the bus. Like, look, he's not getting what I'm trying to put forth on game day either. So, I mean,
Daboll obviously liked him enough to take him to New York, but maybe McDermott on the back of his head had Cromer lined up, and maybe, I mean, you never know what coaches are saying during the season.
I tend to believe that there was possibility that Daboll wouldn't have been back next year or this year now. Like, I tend to think that was a possibility.
I feel like that was always going to be the case after he didn't get the Chargers job. And where like he went into last year thinking like, I am definitely an NFL head coach. And you know, that can create some ego. You know, you're essentially an NFL head coach in waiting. And the only reason why you didn't get a job was because your team advanced to the AFC Championship game, and your buddy that you went to high school, who's the GM in LA, decides not to be patient anymore and hire Staley out of nowhere. So, I mean, I think Daboll knew the whole time he was going to be a head coach somewhere this offseason. Yeah,
that's definitely true. So that's a good point. And yeah, the Bills played better when they learned how to be too high. That's exactly what KC had to learn. You know, you just kind of take away the best part of another team, and you got to run the ball. And these teams always do. These are the best players in the league. You're talking about Patrick Mahomes. You're talking about Josh Allen. These are the best players in the league. They'll figure it out. Sure. Like, they'll drop a game against Jacksonville. They'll drop a game here or there, but they'll ultimately figure it out when they need to figure it out. So it is on the players a little bit at times. It could be on, Brandon Beane, if you want to say the personnel isn't right. But to me, ultimately, I am not worried about Ken Dorsey. I'm sure I'll complain at times. He'll have some growing pains. However, maybe not. Maybe he'll just come in and be a whiz. Brian Daboll wanted him. It was it took way too long to negotiate the number. He's probably pretty well paid, Mike. I'm going to imagine he's not just an entry level, the next promotion kind of pay. He probably got legitimate veteran level offensive coordinator.
If he had a decision between New York and Buffalo, the Bills probably
at the very least
good money. And he was a quarterback coach for a while, and he built a close relationship with Josh Allen. I guarantee you they're going to have camaraderie when the season starts. They know what each other likes. Right. And when they're talking the headset during games, I'm guaranteeing you Josh is going to tell them, I want to run these plays.
Josh wanted him hired.
So, yeah, they'll be fine. When I saw, what was it? I didn't read the article, but I saw something about Kevin Gilbride, former Bills offensive coordinator.
Well, he sucked. What is
NFL coach. Yeah, he was not.
Kevin Killadrive
in Buffalo. Yeah. He was saying, there's something about having experience as an offensive coordinator. And I think back in the day, there probably was something to that. But you see a lot of these young whizzes come in the game and change things up. And really have success. And I think that's because the way we look at football, the way we play football now is a smarter version of the game than what we've ever seen in any other generation. So a guy like Ken Dorsey that has played in this generation, that has been close to some great minds, I feel like he's going to come in and with the talent on this team, it's hard to see them taking much of a drop off. If they drop off dramatically, then I'll be concerned. But it's really hard to see that, regardless of like what you said earlier, who the offensive coordinator is.
Yeah, and there's definitely some people asking what could they do to help him out? Like, could it be another coach like Rob Boris is a guy that's called plays before. He's there. He's a guy I've talked about. Joe Brady has been successful at times. So there's definitely some names there of players, of coaches who can help out in this role. I could be the least bit worried. I think it's an upgrade. I'm going with an upgrade. at the offensive coordinator position. I think the Bills put on all their cards. They wanted to keep him. It was Josh Allen's guy. Basically, they were like, you want to go work with Daniel Jones, or do you want to be, potentially a head coaching candidate in 2 years? Like, I believe that it was that simple.
Yeah, the Joe Brady hire is the one that kind of I'm intrigued about. How does that all play out? You're going from being
the quarterback's coach,
the QB guru at LSU for Joe Burrow, to getting an offensive coordinator job in Carolina. That doesn't pan out, and now you're in Buffalo with Josh Allen. Joe Brady isn't coming to Buffalo to just be a QB coach for the rest of his career. So for a guy that was 2-3 years ago, the talk of college football and the NFL, it's going to be interesting how this all plays out. Is he trying to become a coordinator again somewhere? Is this a 1-year stay in Buffalo? I want to see what his impact will be too, because that's a name Bills fans really haven't been talking about. But Joe Brady is a huge name in this industry.
Yeah. And Mike Shula, good point. Another guy, senior offensive analyst here, also a plethora of experience. This offensive unit is better with Aaron Kromer, Mike Shula, Brady. Obviously, they did have Ken last year, so can't say that's an upgrade technically, but you can by what they're able to do. I think that this is a loaded offensive staff, a loaded staff. Like, this was one of Brandon Beane, beside his personnel moves with Von Miller, getting his corner 2, doing some of the draft, capital that he decided to, and kind of redoing the offensive line that we already talked about. Some of his biggest stuff was kind of totally rehabbing that offensive coaching room. Like, it's that simple. It's like, it's really loaded with talent. You have the Giants offensive coordinator in there, and Shula. He's done a ton of stuff in the past. Obviously, he's got a wealth of experience across many organizations. Miami, he's been in Alabama's head coach from 03 to 06. He's got a plethora of
predecessor to Nick Saban.
Yeah,
that has to suck. That's like being Mark Jackson before Steve Kerr takes over the Golden State Warriors, and
he was the OC of that good Panthers team, though, of when they were good.
I mean, he has the last name. Definitely a good coach. Just never really got to the top.
Yeah. And did make it, just didn't sustain at the top, because literally being the Alabama head coach, it's pretty high up. He just wasn't able to fully get the job done, and got close in Carolina under Brandon Beane. So there's really a lot to like with Shula. There's a lot to like with this unit. I think it's a great unit, man. I think they took some of the best coaches from those Carolina teams now officially. There's a lot to like about this offensive staff in general. And to me, I got it in with Aaron Kromer too. Factoring in Aaron Kromer, I got this offense. I'm putting it on record here on June 17th. I got this offensive staff better than the Bills have had underneath this current run of good play. So we'll see what that amounts to. I was never a Daboll guy. I thought he was creative at times. I thought the Philly specials that he copied, or the throw to Josh Allen in the playoffs against Houston, was kind of fun. I thought he had good stretches, but ultimately he didn't get numbers even underneath this squad at what Josh Allen in the early part of his career here in Buffalo. I ultimately thought he just kind of hit Josh Allen, and he was or wasn't the reason Josh Allen's good. We'll never know if he helped him develop, if it was Dorsey behind closed doors, if it was just Josh Allen himself, if it was Jordan Palmer. Josh Allen always seemed to come back with fixing a major deficiency every single year. And he's doing it this year, whatever that one is. Maybe it's short passes. Maybe it's the screen game. Maybe it's getting weapons out of the backfield. I don't know yet, but he'll tell us probably soon what he worked on probably throughout July. before training camp. So that's ultimately what I got for you, Mike, is that I think this offense, and we kind of went through it all, like what the changes were across the board. But I mean, yeah, I agree. I think it's the best offense the Bills have had coaching and personnel definitely in decade. I mean, just no hands down. We'll see if they got a lot to prove to say that it's the best Bills unit ever. But I do think that it has that potential to be in 2022 with this personnel, with these coaches, and possibly the additions to the scheme. I think it could be the best unit to ever shoot up here in Buffalo. And we just happen to be able to cover and witness it. So it's going to be a fun ride, Mike. But everybody, we're going to bring some great content all camp long. Stay tuned. Stick with us throughout June. We're going to try to bring up fun topics as well throughout this entire off season. Please like us below. That really does help. Also, rate us on Apple Podcasts. That'd be cool. Like, we would love to see some ratings on Apple Podcasts. We love going through those. That does mean a lot to me. Apple's algorithm does really matter as you kind of rate us 5 stars, please. I'm going to do a fun giveaway on that next week, Mike. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to do a fun giveaway. I'm going to give away something fun for reviewing us. And I'm going to pick the best review from that. So leave us something you like. It could even be Ty Montgomery. Leave us any type of review you want. But I'm going to give away maybe an entire blaster box, maybe a signed photo. We'll see. Maybe one of my special balls I got. Please leave us reviews on Apple. That means a lot. Like, seriously, if you could just take a second from your phone, tap the stars, tap 5 stars, tap what you think of the show. That would be excellent. And maybe, yeah, I mean, why not? Maybe I could absolutely find a Cody Ford jersey.
That wouldn't be difficult.
I could make one phone call and get a Cody Ford jersey in here for a giveaway. If I could,
that would create excitement. That's the excitement that we need to generate people giving us reviews.
Yeah, a Cody Ford jersey. I could get it for pennies on the dollar.
10 years from now, when somebody
when he's in the Hall of Fame,
they'll be like, "Is that a Cody Ford jersey?"
You know what? I was getting the baby room ready for our girl coming in the fall. Like I mentioned, due date of the home opening game the opening game of the regular season. Lucky me on that front. However, I found in my closet a signed Dante Whitner jersey. Great. Like, what a great blast from the past. Obviously a signed Marshawn Lynch jersey, which was fun to find. A signed Rob Johnson jersey. Now that was one that I was like super stoked I didn't even know I had. Like, a signed Rob Johnson jersey. That's one of the best things I've ever ran. It's like finding a $20 bill in your pocket. That's how good I felt finding a signed Rob Johnson jersey. Oh man. So just some of those gems. And that's how I want somebody to feel about a signed Cody Ford jersey in 10 years from now. Like,
yeah, that's a really good one, man. A signed Rob Johnson.
Yeah.
I think I got a Terrell Owens Bills jersy.
Okay.
I don't care what people say. I bought that because T.O. on the Bills. Hell yeah, I'm going to have a T.O. jersey. But other than that, I don't really have anything special like that. I had something for the Sabres fans out there. I had a Michael Pekka captain jersey that was signed by like half the team. But then when he held out and was eventually traded to the Islanders, I had my mom at the time take off the Pekka stitching, and then I gave the jersey away. So regrettable in that decision. But no, Rob Johnson signed. Somebody might actually give you money for that just because it's an iconic time in the Bills' history. The whole Johnson Flutie debate. Just the fights every day people had over those two. Just an iconic time in Bills history.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of iconic times. So smash the like button for us below. We're going to release the giveaway next weekend on the show. Next Friday at 8, we'll release the giveaway for the iPad or the Apple podcast review giveaway. So make sure you tune in for that next weekend. That'll be something we go through, as well as a couple other fun topics we're going to be working on. And then we're going to be bringing you some great content in July. I think the whole entire Cover One team's getting together. We're going to be building some content all off season long from camp, in and out, some awesome collabs with all the shows on the Cover One network. So look out for some announcements on that in the coming month or so with that in regards too. So really appreciate everybody coming on here on Friday and being part of, making the Going Deep podcast great on Fridays. So really appreciate all the tune in, the viewers. But from the Going Deep podcast on a beautiful, windy Friday, We look forward to tuning in with you next week and releasing that podcast giveaway for reviewing us. So really appreciate everybody for being on here today. Thanks for tuning in for the OTAs and Minicamps editions. Kevin Massare, Mike Bundt, we will catch you live and we'll catch you here beautifully next week as we enter the dog days of summer. We'll catch everybody later.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills. What else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action.